Hi everybody. In this lesson, I will talk about visibility modifier in Kotlin. So let's start with this diagram. We have package 1, and inside the package 1 we have public class, internal class, and private class. So I also have some of the function, public, internal, and private function, and I have a private variable. So let's implement this by right click and create a new package, and the package 1 is a name. So right click and create some file. Inside this we can define the Kotlin file and classes, and inside this I add the class A, and remember that the package here contains the class A and the default is public. So class A, we have initialization block, and I pre-now that I initialize class A. So what about the class B? The class B, I must add the internal before, and the class A has a public. So the default is public. You right click and create the Kotlin and class B. Okay. Now you define the class B similarly to the class A, and we also have the init block, and it means that the class A and class B is the same package. And yet you add the internal class. And what about the class C? I right click and create class C. So inside this I add the package 1 and class C and the initialization block, and pre-now that I initialize the class C. And what about this? We have a tree function. Tree function at the same level with class A, B, and C, and in the same package 1. So what can I do this? I simply add this function to here outside the class. So we have a public function 1, and I pre-now that is function 1. Okay, let's try with the very simple basic with some print line. So we have a function 2, 3, and private. I define the private is equal to 100. So you can move all of these definition to another file. It is not important. It is okay. So you can add to any file inside the package, and no problem. So it means that 3 of the file is inside the package 1, and you can cut and move back to the class A. Okay. So what about the package 2? We define similarly to package 1. For example, here I choose package and name package 2. Okay. So inside the package 2, we can add the Kotlin file, mean class D, and class D. Inside class D, I define the public class D and the initialization block. When you create a new object, you will show this block. Okay, and we have function 4. You can access public class A from anywhere. Public means you can add from anywhere. So how can do this? I can, for example, I can access class A from here by defining an object of class A. Okay, then the initialization block will be called. This is a function 4 is also a public function, and inside the main I can call the function 4 because the function 4 is public, so you can access a public function 4 anywhere and run. So you see that this is a function 4 and initialize the class A inside the function 4. Okay, so first remember that the public means that you can access anywhere. What about the class B? It is an internal class. You can also access to the internal class and specify which package you implement. Very simple. You must access internal class using the import. You import means you point out that I use this class inside this package, and we have initialize class B. Okay. So what about the class C? Class C, I can access class C inside the same file. The same file with the class definition, you can access this. And if you access outside this file, you cannot access because it is private. For example, if you access here, create a class C object and it will throw arrow, means that you cannot access private class in outer file or in another file depending on independent with the definition file. Okay. And so we have a class D, and subclass D is a subclass of class D. Mean it inherits from class D. So you use a semicolon with the constructor, and you mean that you inherit from class D. And in this case, it throws the arrow because why? Because you have to add open. Open means that can be inherited. You can inherit an open class, then after add open you can inherit it. Okay, so subclass D inherited from class D, and it also inherits some open property, open function inside the class D or the super class. Assume we have a protected open value. So protected open val means that a function or a property can be inherited, but inside the subclass you only use it inside the subclass. For example, you can change it, you can override and change it to another value, but remember that it will only in subclass. So if you access it outside this subclass, it will choose the arrow because it is outside the subclass. You use it in the function for not okay. And you can also access it inside the subclass. Inside the initialization block, you can print out and you can access to this. Okay. But you cannot access it outside in another function. What about the private? You cannot use a private open, or you cannot inherit a private property. So you only inherit protected public with open property. Okay. So if you override value, so Z, you can surely you can inherit and override the